I know most of you know Nuran. Just to refresh, Nuran was born in Cape Town, South Africa, one of 9 Catholic children. At age 20, she decided that she was going to become a nun to see if that vocation was good for her. After much soul searching, Nuran realized that having a family was something she really wanted. She met Imam Sykes, her husband. They married, moved to the United States, and she's never looked back. And we are so glad that they're part of our family here too.
Morning, everyone. Just get all my stuff set up. I'm so happy to see everyone here this morning. Thank you for coming. Okay. So my topic today is Muslim women. The more I contemplate and ponder over this topic, I wonder if other faith traditions endure the scrutiny and pain Muslim women do. Abdurrahman and I lecture at colleges often, and the question that is guaranteed is, why are Muslim women oppressed? If I could change the conversation of Muslim women, I would say Muslim women are not necessarily subservient. Muslim women are not oppressed, and Muslim women are not a monolith. We have many different facets to our identity. It would be naive to think that when I left here today, our conversation would totally change your mind. However, I would like to change the narrative, usher in a new narrative that will give women in our faith tradition the dignity God has ordained and commanded for us. At a time when the rest of the world, from Greece and Rome to India and China, considered women as no better than children or even slaves, Islam gave them rights. We're talking 1447 years ago. The Quran states in Surah Al-Rum, chapter 30, verse 21, and among his signs is this, that he created mates for you from yourselves, and that you may rest, that you may find rest and repose in them. And he ordained between you love and mercy. Certainly, herein, indeed, are signs for people who reflect. The Prophet Muhammad, so I've got to say this, we have 2 sources, the Quran, which is our holy book, and then the Hadith are the traditions and the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. This is what the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said. The most perfect in faith amongst believers is he who is best in manners and he who is kind to his wife. And I am the best to my wives. We have to start this conversation, I believe, with our mother Eve, that is the mother of humanity. Not to take anything away from their devotion, but the Christian outlook blames Eve. In Islam, they both sinned, they both repented, and they both amended. Eve was not the evil temptress. Both were instructed not to eat from the tree, and both partook. One of the most visible symbols of Muslim women's identity is the hijab or the headscarf, which is part of the broader Islamic principle of modesty. The Quran instructs both men and women to dress modestly to avoid drawing attention to their physical appearance, and this is in chapter 24, 30 to 31. However, the practice of covering varies widely across diverse cultures and countries. Some women wear the hijab, while others choose to cover more completely with garments such as the niqab or the burqa. There is an ongoing debate within and outside the Muslim world about the meaning and significance of the hijab. While many Muslims view it as a symbol of faith, piety, and identity, others see it as a potential tool of oppression, particularly in contexts where wearing it is mandated by law. It is important to distinguish the cultural enforcement of dress codes and the personal, voluntary choice to wear it, which many Muslim women affirm as an empowering expression of their faith. So I've got to throw in a personal story about the hijab for me. This was one of the most difficult choices I made as a Muslim. It was more difficult than my actual journey to Islam. I embraced Islam in 1988, and about 6 months into my reversion, I said to Abdurrahman, "Can you tell me what the Quran says about the hijab?" The wise old fellow that he is, he said, "Are you sure you want to know?" I said, "Yes. I've been thinking about this for quite a while." And this was one of the sort of hindrances from me actually embracing Islam. I studied for about a year, and I was feeling so drawn to the faith, but the head covering was a stumbling block. I just didn't think I could ever do it. So anyway, Abdurrahman said to me, "Now, Nuran, you know that if I give you the verses and the hadiths and give you all the material about covering your head, you are held accountable. Once you know, you can't turn back." And I said to him, "You know what? Don't tell me. I am not ready for this this chapter." And the reason being, in South Africa, in Cape Town, there are so many, in the town that I grew up, there are so many, we call them hijabis, ladies with scarves. So it was really part of our community. We didn't think twice about the young ladies that worked in our clothing stores. But in the US, I had seen the Muslim women being scrutinized. And sometimes I would hear people saying things about them, and this was very difficult for me. So on February 10th, 1991, this is 3 years later, I woke up in the morning. I was in labor with my third daughter. And I said, "You know what? Today's the day." Because as Muslims, we believe that when we give birth, our slate is wiped clean. So I woke up to pray, maybe 5 o'clock, depending, I'm not sure what the time was at that time. And I put my hijab on, and this was the beginning of my journey. A tough, tough journey that I've got a pickleball friend right here. And I know I can tell you so many stories about me arriving at a facility with my hijab. But in New Smyrna, I arrived at the courts, and I don't know if any of the people had seen a Muslim woman in real life. They've obviously seen them on the news, and because we get so much coverage. But I walked up to the courts and not a single person would play with me. Not a person invited me into their games. And I stood there for about probably 15 minutes. And somebody came up and said, well, you know, what level are you? And I said, well, can I show you? Well, I won my first game. I was in the group. But just to imagine that Muslim women have to endure this sometimes in the workplace, in the sports arena, it just is it's a tough pill to swallow. Okay. It is important to distinguish the cultural enforcement dress code and personal, and so I mentioned that. I have to also talk about marriage in Islam. A woman has the right to choose her husband. Islamic law is very strict regarding the necessity of having the woman's consent for marriage. The groom gives his wife a dowry. The dowry is not she's not being sold. The dowry is so that if something happens in the marriage, she'll have something to fall back on. She does not give the dowry back if they get divorced. She keeps her own name. And if in the case of divorce, she can actually seek to have the children, if they are young, to be with her. But we hear so many awful things about Muslim marriages, and these people are not acting according to Islam. In Islam, violence is prohibited, but domestic violence is a big, big issue with Muslims. I spoke to, many, many years ago, a policeman that lived in New York, and he said to me, in the Arab area or the Muslim area, domestic violence was very prevalent. We know it's prevalent across the world, but he had to mention us. Women have been given a very, very high status. It says, let the woman live in the same lifestyle that she was living in prior. Do not treat her badly. And also, the husband has to negotiate. It's called shura. Negotiate with his wife with family matters. The mutuality that is part and parcel of the relationship must never be forgotten. Spouses are described as garments for each other in the Holy Quran in chapter 2, 187, signifying that they are each responsible for taking care of and protecting each other. It is a mistake for Muslims to believe that men are superior to women or that men have the right to control or dictate to them. This attitude is completely contrary to the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who consulted his wives in many matters, including those related to his position as head of state. In the Quran, in chapter 33, verse 35, one of my favorite go-to verses when I'm talking about Muslim women, it says, indeed, the Muslim men and Muslim women, the believing men and believing women, the obedient men and obedient women, the truthful men and the truthful women, the patient men and the patient women, the humble men and the humble women, the charitable men and the charitable women, the fasting men and the fasting women, the men who guard their private parts and the women who do so, and the men who remember God often and the women who do so. For them, God has prepared forgiveness and a great reward. Despite the fact that in many places and times, Muslim communities have not always adhered to all or even many of the foregoing in practice, the ideal has been there for 1447 years. While virtually all other major civilizations did not begin to address these issues or change their negative attitudes until the 19th and 20th century. And there are still many contemporary civilizations which have yet to do so. Women started voting August 26, 1920 in the US, 105 years ago. Britain in 1860 passed Married Woman Property Act. There is no restriction in Islamic law saying women cannot work or have a profession. As a matter of fact, it is highly recommended for Muslim women to seek out women medical providers. If I choose, my earnings belong to me. If Abdurrahman's works, his earnings belong to me as well. So it worked out pretty well. There is a hadith that the Prophet was actually, peace and blessings be upon him, was sitting talking to a man, and the man's young daughter walked into the room. He acknowledged her, he greeted her, but when his son came in, he got up, kissed his son on the forehead, and put his son in his lap. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, reprimanded the man and said to him that this is an injustice. When Prophet Muhammad's youngest daughter, Fatima, would walk into the room, he would get up, he would kiss her on her forehead, and he would put her on his lap. For a dedicated Muslim, be it male or female, the ultimate goal is to seek the pleasure of God and fulfill one's duties on this earth. I have to mention the women that inspired me when I was studying this topic. And I also have to say that the Prophet Muhammad came as a liberator. From the very inception of Islam, the tradition regarding daughters, one or two daughters, if they look after them and take care of them well, we or the daughters are a shield for us on the day of judgment. There was a woman named Shifa bint Abdullah, a strong, intelligent woman whom Omar was the second person in succession after the Prophet Muhammad passed away. He was a companion, and he chose a police woman to run the marketplace in Medina. She walked around with her stick, keeping the peace and reprimanding those that were violating the business transaction laws of the Sharia. When he had to find somebody to run the Meccan marketplace, he chose a woman as well. So does this not refute that Muslim women, according to the teachings of Islam, are supposed to be submissive, oppressed? However, I do want to say that it doesn't happen that Muslims, like other faiths, are perfect. These women were outside their homes. They worked a job alongside men. Nusayba, the female warrior who courageously defended the Prophet in several battles. The one whom the Prophet said about her at the Battle of Uhud, whenever I looked to the right or left, I saw her fighting in front of me. The one whom the Prophet asked, from where can anyone get courage like you, Umara? Rufayda bint Sa'ad was the first female nurse in Islamic history. The Prophet ordered the wounded and dying to be sent to her tent during battles. Learning medical knowledge from her father, she became an expert in the medical field and began training other women companions to become nurses as well. She was known as a kind, empathic healer, as well as a compassionate social worker who took care of orphans, the handicapped, and the poor. There are 4 women that are considered to be perfect in Islam. This is not in the Quran. This is what the tradition, what the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be said about them. The first one is Miriam, the mother of Jesus, one of the perfect women. There is a chapter in the Quran that is named after her. The only chapter that is named after a woman is a Christian woman. But we love Miriam, Mary, the mother of Jesus. Khadijah, the first prophet of the wife that he was married to for 25 years before she passed. She was the woman that actually sent somebody after him, so she approached him for marriage. She was not forced to marry him. She was 15 years older than he was, and she was not a virgin. Fatima, the youngest daughter of the Prophet, is known as one of the perfect women, and Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh. In the West, we have objectification and sexualization of women. Islam paints an amazing picture. Rarely in other religions do we judge their failures by their faith. The problem we as Muslims have is that people judge us by what Muslims do, not what the Quran or the Prophet teach. We have to go back to history, folks. We might also mention that while many in the West criticize Islam with regard to the treatment of women, in fact, a number of Muslim countries or countries that are highly populated by Muslims have had women rulers and presidents. To name a few: Turkey, Bangladesh, Singapore, Tunisia, Senegal, and Mauritius. I want to close today by reading a poem from Rumi, my favorite poet. Woman is a beam of the divine light. She is not the being whom sensual desires take as objects. She is a creator, it should be said. She is not a creature. Great Fatima ul-Zahra means Fatima of the radiant, brightest star, star of Venus, the evening star. The daughter of the Prophet is the secret in Sufism. She is the Hujjat of Ali. In other words, she establishes the esoteric sense of his knowledge and guides those who attain to it. Through her perfume, we breathe paradise. Though she was his daughter, the Prophet Muhammad called her Abiya, mother of her father. What mystery was the Prophet hinting at by this statement? While Fatima Zahra was Muhammad's daughter, the spiritual Fatima al-Batul, the divine virgin, her house is the living Kaaba. The Kaaba is a place that all Muslims should go to once in their lifetime. It's part of the Hajj, their pilgrimage, and this is what we think about women in Islam. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for letting me be with you guys today. I appreciate it.